Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation on advancing the capacity of the AHP support workforce through the AHP Competency, Education, and Career Development Framework. This resource has been developed to support the AHP support workers across Humber and North Yorkshire. It is intended for learning and reference and can be revisited at any time. My name is Anthony Emeribe, and I am currently the AHP Support Workforce Lead for Humber and North Yorkshire, with the responsibility of implementing the AHP Support Worker Framework across our region. By the end of this presentation, you should have an understanding of the AHP Support Worker Framework and its purpose. You should also be able to identify practical next steps to support embedding the framework into practice. The presentation will highlight the importance of learning from support work experiences and recognize the value and contribution of support workers across services and the wider system. These objectives provide the context for this presentation. What are we trying to accomplish with this presentation? This workshop is part of a wider initiative to recognize, develop, and expand the non-registered AHP workforce. We're here to build awareness, recognition, and understanding of the vital role AHP support workers play, and to make sure that patients and service users receive care from skilled, confident, and well-trained support workers. Also, that AHP support workers have a clear understanding about their pathways for growth, development, and rewarding careers. That services and systems work together to reduce the variation in roles, banding, and progression. And that support worker roles are recognized as central to improving services and shaping new models of care. The next slide provides more details about the AHP Support Worker Competency, Education, and Career Development Framework. Before introducing the framework, it is important to understand the context in which this work is taking place. As part of this process, a short survey was shared with AHP support workers across the region to understand current levels of awareness of the AHP support worker competency, education, and career development framework. The results showed that approximately 70% of respondents were not aware of the framework, while around 30% reported that they were aware of it. This indicates a gap in awareness and consistency, highlighting a system-wide opportunity to improve awareness. In response to this, the next section will focus more on the framework itself, what the framework is, why the framework matters, and how it can be used to support workers and services in practice. What is this framework? The AHP Support Worker Framework is a structure that provides guidance on training, education, and competencies for AHP support workers. It is a framework that demonstrates a clear pathway for recruitment and progression and guides support workers to see and access opportunities to undertake relevant training and continuous professional development. In simple terms, the framework is a guide that helps make support worker roles clearer, gives them fair training and career growth, and makes sure patients get better care. Having outlined what the framework is by definition, this part focuses on why the framework. At the heart of the AHP support worker framework is the question, how can we support, develop, and value AHP support workers so they can deliver the best care possible? How can we make sure that support worker roles are clearer, their career more supported, and their impact on patients stronger? This is why the framework is important. It's about clarity, making sure that support workers have a clear structure of their roles, skills, and progression. It's about development, ensuring that support workers have the right training, education, and career pathways available. It's about recognition, ensuring that support workers have the right value attached to their contribution within their respective AHP teams. And it's about consistency, so that no matter which trust or services they work in, they have access to the same opportunities and standards. The support worker framework is about giving support workers the right training, recognition, and career pathways so they can do their job better and feel valued. This is the reason for the framework being developed for the AHP support workers. To bring more clarity and building on why the framework is important, the purpose of the AHP Support Worker Framework is to ensure consistency and role clarity for AHP support workers, to ensure adequate career progression for AHP support workers, to support transformation and innovation for AHP support workers, and to increase the capacity and capability of AHP support workers in delivering the best care possible. It is also important to note that the framework does not replace profession specific frameworks, rather, it complements profession specific frameworks. Having outlined the purpose of the framework, this section looks at the benefits of the framework to the support worker. It is important to note that support workers can use this framework to understand their roles, see what skills they need, plan their training, and know how they can progress in their career and what options are available for them. Also, support workers can use the framework to identify their current and future development needs, as well as use the framework to support their continuous professional development. Support workers can also use the framework as part of their supervision, appraisal, and professional development meetings to guide their progression in their aspirations and future plans. Alongside the benefits for support workers, the framework also offers clear benefits for employing organizations. For example, NHS trusts use the framework to set clear job roles, design training, support career progression, and make sure support workers are used effectively to improve patient care. The framework can additionally serve as a tool for evaluating progress and improvement. For NHS organizations, implementing this framework means stronger workforce retention, better care for patients, efficient use of skills, and a sustainable workforce. Before looking at the framework in more detail, this section gives an overview of the structure of the framework. The support worker framework is made up of three career levels: the support worker, the senior support worker, and the assistant practitioner. It is progressive. It goes from level to level. That is, you can progress from the support worker to a senior support worker and to the level of the assistant practitioner. The framework is made up of 8 domains and speaks of the educational requirement needed to function at a particular level and the requirement needed to progress from a particular level to another level, as well as highlights the functional and digital skills required to function at each particular level and what it takes to progress from one level to another. Building on the structure of the framework, this section introduces the various stages of the framework. The first stage is the support worker, otherwise known as the entry level. Support workers at this stage require a basic factual knowledge and understanding of their field of work. At this level, they may be able to carry out straightforward and simple tasks according to local policies. It is important to know that support workers at this framework stage require close supervision and guidance in carrying out their tasks. The second stage is the senior support worker, otherwise known as the intermediate level. Support workers at this stage require knowledge and understanding of facts, principles, processes, and general concepts that govern their field of work. At this level, They may be able to carry out a wider range of delegated duties than the person working at an entry level. This means that they will have more responsibility, contribute more to service development, and the overall personal development. The third stage is the assistant practitioner. At this stage, the assistant practitioner is required to have factual and theoretical knowledge of principles, procedures, processes, and concepts that govern their field of work. At this level, their work is guided by standard operating procedures, knowledge of protocols, and systems of work. They are able to function at a higher level of responsibility than the senior support worker and the support worker at the entry level. They are able to contribute to service development and show adequate demonstration of leadership and self-development. In addition to the overall structure and stages, the framework is built around 8 core domains. The first domain has to do with formal knowledge and experience. The second domain has to do with support and service users. The third domain has to do with clinical, technical, and scientific roles and responsibilities. The fourth domain has to do with communication and information. The fifth domain has to do with safe and inclusive environments. The sixth domain has to do with research and service improvements. The seventh domain has to do with leadership. And the eighth domain has to do with personal and professional values and behaviors. It is important to note that each domain sets out requirements for support workers, senior support workers, and assistant practitioners in terms of the level of responsibility needed at each framework stage. It is also important to note that there is a progression in complexity and demand from one stage to the next, and that at each domain, a level of competence is outlined in line with your level of experience and qualification. At this stage, I will briefly talk through each of the 8 domains, highlighting their focus and relevance in practice. The first domain focuses on formal knowledge and experience. Now, this includes the minimum essential qualification and experience required for AHP support workers at each stage of the framework. For example, at the entry stage, support workers are required to hold a level 2 functional skills qualification. At the intermediate stage, support workers are required to hold a level 3 qualification or demonstrate the ability and commitment to achieve a relevant level 3 qualification. For the assistant practitioners, they're required to hold a foundation degree in health and social care or a level 5 equivalent, or demonstrate the ability and commitment to achieve a relevant level 5 qualification. The second domain relates to supporting service users. This domain emphasizes supporting service users and their families throughout their care pathway. It has to do with promoting health and well-being and understanding the wider health and social care system. As established earlier, each domain sets out requirements for the level of responsibility at each of the framework stages. This means the level of responsibility will be different for support workers at the entry level, senior support workers, and assistant practitioners. For example, as it relates to this domain, support workers at the entry level are required to provide person-centered care and support. The level of responsibility increases for the senior support worker. At this framework stage, they are required to understand and demonstrate what it means to provide person-centered care by providing education and resources to support informed decision-making. For the assistant practitioners, they are required to consistently deploy care, treatment, and support strategies to promote and provide person-centered care, which is at a level of responsibility higher than the senior support worker and the support worker. The third domain focuses on clinical, technical, and scientific roles and responsibilities. Here it outlines the underpinning knowledge and practice required to support service users safely and effectively. For example, the underpinning knowledge component of this domain requires that support workers demonstrate a basic understanding of routine clinical processes involved in their roles. For the senior support worker, they are required to demonstrate core knowledge of clinical and scientific processes involved in their roles. For the assistant practitioner, they are required to demonstrate adequate knowledge of clinical, technical, and scientific processes involved in delivering their roles. The fourth domain covers communication and information. It has to do with having respectful communication, information sharing, and maintaining confidentiality. For example, it is the responsibility of both support workers at the entry stage, the intermediate stage, and the assistant practitioner stage to maintain confidentiality and data protection. At all three stages, they are required to understand the importance of assessing, maintaining, and storing documentation relating to care in accordance with local policy and the legal requirements for maintaining confidentiality and data protection. The fifth domain focuses on creating safe and inclusive environments. Here it highlights equality, safeguarding, well-being, and the importance of duty of care. For example, the health and safety component of this domain requires all support workers at each of the framework stages to contribute to the maintenance of healthy and safe working environments through appropriate practice, use of resources, techniques, and behaviors, and the understanding of relevant legislation in the line of their duty. The sixth domain relates to research and service improvement. This includes the involvement of all AHP support workers in audits, evaluation, and improvement activities within their service. For example, the service improvement component of this domain requires that support workers at the entry level participate in evaluation and quality improvement activities relevant to their own work in their departments. For the senior support worker, at this level, they are required to contribute to audits, service evaluations, and quality improvement projects. For the assistant practitioner, at this level, they are required to participate in and contribute to quality improvement projects, audits, and service evaluation. At this stage, they are required to carry out quality improvement projects of their own and contribute positively to service improvement within their departments. The seventh domain focuses on leadership. This recognizes the role of AHP support workers as role models who contribute to service improvement and safety. For example, the professionalism component of this domain requires that all support workers at each of the framework stages act in a professional manner and demonstrates the NHS constitution values, which includes working together for patients, respect and dignity, a commitment to quality of care, compassion, improving lives, and making sure everyone counts. The eighth and final domain focuses on personal and professional values and behaviors. This has to do with the values and personal learning and self-development required to work in health and social care. This aligns with the NHS Constitution and People Promise, as well as a commitment to ongoing self-development and well-being. For example, the health and well-being component of this domain requires all support workers at each of the framework stages to understand and act on own safety and health and well-being needs and support the health and well-being of wider team members, which is a requirement for effective working within their teams. Now that we've looked at what the 8 domains are, the next important question is, how do support workers actually use the framework in practice? This slide focuses on the practical actions support workers can take to meet the requirements across each domain. The framework was not designed to be used once or in isolation. It's intended to support ongoing reflection, development, and progression. It first starts with self-assessment and reflection, identifying your current strengths and areas for development in relation to the 8 domains. This then feeds into supervision sessions and personal development review discussions where your objectives and career goals can be explored and talked about with your supervisors and line managers. From there, support workers can create or update their personal development plan, access learning opportunities, and request shadowing or supervised practice where appropriate to deepen their knowledge base. Importantly, the framework should be used as a guide throughout this process. It should be revisited regularly to support continuous professional development rather than a one-off experience. In this way, the framework becomes a practical tool that supports confidence, increases capability, and advances support worker career development across all support worker roles. It is important to recognize that progression does not look the same for everyone. Not all support workers wish to progress into a registered profession. For some support workers, progression is not about becoming a registered professional, but about developing within their current role. For support workers who do not wish to progress into a registered role, the question is, what do you do? The next section will highlight some of the options available to AHP support workers who do not wish to progress into a registered role. A survey conducted for support workers within the region showed that about 57% of AHP support workers in the region did not wish to progress into a registered AHP profession, while about 42% wanted to progress into a registered AHP profession, highlighting an important point that for some support workers, progression is not about becoming a registered professional, but about developing within their current role. This brings us to the 4 pillars of practice. For AHP support workers who may not wish to progress into a registered AHP profession, this is where the 4 pillars of practice become particularly important. The 4 pillars of practice provide a way for individuals to evaluate and develop their skills across 4 key areas. Now, good practice is about developing across all 4 pillars, helping support workers become well-rounded, confident, and effective in their roles. These pillars are clinical practice, facilitating learning, leadership, and service improvement. Although clinical practice often forms the largest part of support worker roles, the other pillars are equally important. They recognize the contribution support workers make through leadership, learning, quality improvement, and service development. In the next sections, I will briefly talk through each of the 4 pillars and what they can look like in practice for AHP support workers. Starting with clinical practice. This pillar sits at the core of the AHP support worker role. It reflects how support workers apply their skills, knowledge, and experience to deliver high quality person centered care. And it's important to note that this is where most support workers spend the majority of their time and where their impact is most visible. This section is about the leadership and management pillar, which focuses on how the support worker embodies responsibility, role modeling, and contributes to service and quality improvement. Beyond delivering care, it is important that support workers grow in confidence and responsibility, which is where the leadership pillar comes into play. It is more about how support workers influence safe practice, teamwork, and promote quality of care. For support workers who do not wish to progress into a registered AHP profession, they can choose to develop their competencies in this pillar and contribute effectively to service improvement and quality improvement. Various leadership programs, such as the Edward Jenner Leadership Program, can position AHP support workers to be able to influence their environment and influence their peers and colleagues from a service improvement point of view. This section focuses on the education pillar, which highlights the role of learning, development, and knowledge sharing in support worker practice. The education pillar emphasizes the AHP role as a teacher and facilitator of learning, as well as being a lifelong learner themselves. For AHP support workers who do not wish to progress into a registered AHP profession, they may choose to develop competencies in this education pillar that positions them to be able to offer both mentorship and supervision to their junior colleagues, students, and other team members for the purpose of improving health literacy and enabling informed decisions. This section focuses on the education pillar. This is more than just conducting formal research. It is about promoting evidence-based practice and driving innovation. It recognizes the role support workers can play in research and improvement. For AHP support workers who may not wish to progress into a registered AHP profession, they may choose to develop competencies in this research pillar and use skills developed from this competency to contribute to service improvement and overall quality improvement. Bringing this all together, for support workers who do not wish to progress into a registered profession, meaningful development is still both possible and encouraged. This includes continuing to develop competencies within the role, accessing occupation-specific training, and considering structured development routes such as the Level 3 apprenticeships or the High Development Awards where necessary. It is important to note that regular supervision plays a key role in supporting this development, alongside having a personal development plan that clearly reflects your individual career goals and aspirations. Having explored options for AHP support workers who do not wish to progress into registered professions, we will now look at how the framework supports progression into registered AHP professions and what support workers need to do to progress into registered AHP professions. Building on the previous introduction, it is important to consider some context. A regional survey conducted for AHP support workers within the region identified a lack of clear career progression as the third most significant challenge experienced by support workers across the region. This highlights an important point that many support workers do aspire to progress, but unclear or inconsistent pathways can act as a barrier. The next section explores how the framework helps to support clearer and more structured routes for AHP support workers wishing to progress into registered professional roles. This section looks at in more detail what support workers need to do to progress into registered AHP professions. Supporting progression starts with having clear and visible career pathways. Support workers need to understand what progression really looks like, what options are available, and what steps are required of them to move forward. It is important that support workers have early and ongoing career conversations with both their supervisors and line managers. These conversations should help support workers understand where they are now and what they may need to progress. Now, this includes understanding their current qualifications. For example, do they hold their functional skills? If they do not have their functional skills, this should be discussed with their supervisor or line manager to explore opportunities for support, including access to study leave. Without these conversations, planning for progression simply does not happen. Where their functional skills are in place, the next discussion should be around existing qualifications. Do they have a level 3 or a level 4 qualification? If not, can they be enrolled into the level 3 apprenticeship? These discussions should be held to understand where the support worker is really at in terms of their development. For those who have progressed to a level 5, or for those who hold their level 5 qualifications, further conversations are still needed. If a level 5 qualification is not yet in place, could they be signposted or enrolled into the level 5 apprenticeship? Will that prove to be the right next step for that support worker? For support workers who already hold a level 5, a level 6, or level 7 qualifications, the discussions can then focus on their readiness for progression into a degree apprenticeship. Now, this includes exploring how prepared the individual feels, what additional experience may be needed, and what organizational support is available for the support worker. Now, these are not one-off conversations. They are ongoing, structured discussions that allow progressions to be planned over time rather than left to chance. Apprenticeships and work-based learning routes play an important role in widening access into registered professions, providing structured learning alongside employment and a supported route into professional registration. The AHP Support Worker Competency, Education and Career Development Framework brings all of these elements together, thus providing a structured and consistent approach to supporting progression into registered AHP professions. We have now explored what the AHP Support Worker Competency, Education and Career Development Framework is, why it exists, and how it can be used in practice. We've looked at how the framework supports development across the 8 domains, how it applies to those who wish to remain within support roles, and how it provides structured pathways for those who aspire to progress into registered AHP professions. We've also highlighted the importance of early career conversations, understanding current qualifications, and using supervision and personal development planning to support progression in a planned and meaningful way. This brings us to the conclusion. In simple terms, the framework acts as a guide for career development. It helps support workers understand the full range of opportunities available to them. It clarifies different progression pathways and outlines the skills, experience, and development needed to move forward, whether that is within the support workforce or into a registered profession. The AHP Support Worker Framework is more than a guidance document. It is a strategic tool that supports individuals, strengthens organizations, and contributes to a sustainable AHP workforce. By embedding the framework in practice, we ensure that support workers feel valued. We ensure that development is structured and consistent, and patients receive high quality, safe, and effective care. Thank you for taking the time to engage with this presentation and for the vital contribution AHP support workers make across all our services. I hope this overview has provided clarity, encouragement, and a practical understanding of how the framework can be used to support your development. Finally, I would like to add an important clarification to provide further context around progression opportunities. The development and progression pathways discussed in this video are influenced by local workforce planning, service demand, and organizational capacity within individual trusts. Not all organizations will be in the same position to offer progression opportunities at the same time, and availability for such opportunities may vary across systems. In addition, even where colleagues have successfully completed relevant qualifications, such as the Level 3 or Level 5 apprenticeships, and have undertaken preparation towards a degree apprenticeship, it is important to note that progression into an apprenticeship role is not automatic. Apprenticeship opportunities are subject to service need, workforce planning priorities, and available funding. Where there is significant interest in a limited number of apprenticeship posts, these opportunities may be subject to a competitive recruitment process to ensure fairness, transparency, and alignment with organizational and patient care priorities. Support workers are therefore encouraged to have ongoing career development conversations with the line manager and workforce leads to understand what opportunities are available locally at any given time. The framework is intended to support structured development and informed career conversations, and we remain committed to strengthening opportunities for the AHP support workforce across the system.